relations are on the uptick. Marami po tayong pinag-uusapan tungkol dyan, and it has something to do, of course, with the tension in Asia concerning the Spratleys Islands. Pero saan nga ba papunta at papaano nga ba lumalalim ang relasyon ng Estados Unidos at ng Pilipinas? Kamakailan po ay nakausap natin si Representative Ed Roy. Siya po ang chair ng Terrorism, Non-Proliferation at Trade Subcommittee ng House Committee of Foreign Affairs, at ito po ang kanyang sinabi. Congressman, thank you so much for visiting us here. I know you're very busy. So tell us about the latest hearing on U.S.-Philippines relationship.
Well, Janelle, our latest hearing focused on several different issues. One of them is trade legislation, which intends to liberalize trade between the Philippines and the United States. And, you know, a lot of jobs ended up going to China instead of the Philippines some years ago when the textile quota bill expired. So the goal here is to give an advantage to the Philippines for cases where they use U.S. yarn or Philippine yarn in order to make blue jeans, ship those to the United States. It would be a big boost to the economy in the Philippines if we could get that trade bill through, and I'm a co-sponsor of that act. We focused on that. We also focused on some of the problems that are occurring in the West Philippine Sea or East China Sea, depending on the perspective. But the point is, those are supposed to be international waters. We are not supposed to see the types of confrontations that we're seeing with the attacks on Philippine fishing boats. We want to lessen those tensions, and we also have legislation to try to do that.
All right, we're going to be talking about those today on the show, but first, you're the chair for the TNT, so Terrorism, Non-Proliferation, and Trade Subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and so this is your turf. When we talk about U.S.-Philippines relationship, what comprises that?
Well, it's a treaty relationship. We have 5 treaty relationships in Asia, you know, that go back 60 years, and of course, historically, in that security relationship between the Philippines and the United States, the United States has certain commitments, certain responsibilities. One of the recent incidents was the transfer of one of our heavy capital ships in the Coast Guard. It was the Hamilton, and then later, in a few days, we're going to transfer the Dallas over. Well, these are capital ships that are used. It's now the flagship. The Hamilton is now the Gregorio, and it's the flagship of the Philippine Navy. So we assist the Philippine Navy. We assist on the security front also in training. We have special forces, Navy SEALs and Army Special Forces that help, especially in the southern Philippines. And you saw a few days ago where Abu Sayyaf, you know, maybe a week ago, where that unit was taken down, that terrorist organization, and as a consequence, we've probably seen Philippine forces eliminate 600, 700 hardcore Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists alone.
Through your help.
And with some help from the United States.
Yeah, without a doubt, the U.S. presents itself as the strongest ally of the Philippines. But not a lot of Filipinos are welcoming of that thought. But first, let's talk about the trade relations that you mentioned earlier before we get into the politics behind this. The trade relations, the SAVE Act is what you were mentioning earlier. We've talked about this on the show before. Where are we at now in that? What are the chances of it being implemented?
The bill has gone from the Rules Committee to the Ways and Means Committee. The Ways and Means Committee is the final committee of jurisdiction on this, and so discussions are underway. And one of the things we did with a forum that we had on my committee was to raise this issue. Kurt Campbell, of course, was there, the Secretary of State. We had the Defense Department represented as well. And so we discussed the ramification of you know, liberalizing trade with the Philippines, what it would mean for trade and investment. And then there's another issue as well. That's the assistance the United States is trying to give President Aquino in some of his reforms, because the reforms are very, very important to lay the right groundwork in the Philippines for more economic growth.
Right. And so we're seeing an uptick in the talks about Philippines and U.S. relationship. And some people are saying that this can be attributed to the tension, the growing tension that's happening right now in Asia because of what you said, you know, West China Sea or South China Sea and West Philippine Sea. And we're talking about the Spratlys. What will be the role of U.S. in that issue?
To try to move this to a multinational solution where you have countries from throughout the region engaged. And the reason for this is because there aren't other countries that share China's perspective, as you can imagine. Other countries view the limit to their boundaries as being maybe a maximum, 200 miles. So there are no other nations that lay claim to the entire sea. And so what the United States is encouraging is, and you'll see this also, is Indonesia and Malaysia. And,
Vietnam.
Yeah, well, every country in the region, South Korea, etc. All of these countries, and internationally, the international community is trying to get China to resolve this diplomatically. The reason is because we want to lower these tensions in the region. We want to get away from the bellicose, confrontational approach and try to get it resolved.
Just 2 days ago, Singapore actually issued a warning to the U.S. saying that more than lowering the tension, the U.S., by aiding the Philippines with all these arms and ships and all that, is actually helping to grow the tension there. I think, you can address that question.
I can address that.
Yes, well, the Philippines appreciates the fact that the U.S. seems to be aiding the Philippines in asserting our claim on the Spratlys Island. There are some people saying that rather than or more than lessening the tension in Asia, the U.S. is actually, by helping and aiding the Philippines with arms and all that, is actually helping to grow the tension in the region. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, China is making that claim, of course, making that argument. But the problem is that China has encroached now to the waters right off the coast of the Philippines. If you look at the latest efforts by China to, cut cables or to harass Filipino shipping and also fishing vessels in that area, it's now right off the coast. And so the attempt here is to at least give the Philippines to answer their requests for having enough of a naval presence in order to stop that type of activity. And here's why. If China ends up basically laying claim to territorial waters that are the waters of the Philippines, not only does that lay claim to the shipping lanes through there, but it also lays claims to the fishing rights and the mineral rights that otherwise would accrue to the Philippines.
Yes.
And so the Philippines has an interest, as does
most definitely
South Korea,
yes.
Taiwan, certainly Australia, Japan, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. They're all jointly operating right now to try to discourage this kind of activity, and that is why we are answering the request from the Philippines.